Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Forward Thinking Podcast. It's Chrissy and Charlie here from CS2. And today we're going to talk about 3 things that marketing ops people should do to differentiate themselves. So really, what are those 3 things that you can do to make sure that you're more of a forward-thinking MOPS leader, and really to help you stand out as a great MOPS leader? So even from like good, but really to great. And this is kind of a warm up into a session that we're going to be doing at OpStars this fall. And so we wanted to get the conversation going. And if you are interested, after listening to this, you can sign up for OpStars, which is happening in October. You can go to Lean Data's website for more info on that.
It's sign up open, registration open already? Okay, cool.
Yep. All right. So where should we start? Like, do you want to give the background, Charlie?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what got us thinking about this is something that's been very encouraging over the last 18 months, especially, but it's something that probably has been brewing for the last couple of years. When we both started in marketing operations, although there has been, technically marketing operations, over 10 years ago and a lot longer ago, it kind of got reinvented when Marketo and other technologies came out, started really empowering marketers to be able to use technology to better their marketing efforts. And it's even around that time, it was gathering steam, but still like a lot of what you would see was marketing ops would be this kind of person behind the scenes, like managing Marketo, basically doing as they're told, kind of executing on campaigns, doing a lot of campaign execution. And there were exceptions to that, of course. There was a lot of great stuff going on too, but just generally that was a bit of a trend for a while. Over the years, like marketing ops started to get kind of a bit more traction, more the business started to see the value, but it was still always been a bit of an uphill struggle, especially for the type of companies that we've been involved in our career with that kind of these very fast-paced startup mid-sized tech companies where they might have like one marketing operations person and they're just overwhelmed, right? They're under-resourced, they don't have the headcount they need. And it's very difficult to really think strategically when you're fighting fires all day and you're just dealing with the day-to-day. However, fast forward to about 18 months ago, and the pandemic definitely accelerated this. Companies, I think, started to really wake up. You started to see maybe that one headcount turn to 2 in companies. Started to see stuff on LinkedIn. Maybe we're in a bit of a bubble in LinkedIn, but a lot of people, even outside marketing operations, even the Dave Gerhardts of the world, talking about how marketing operations would be the first hire or the most important hire or the person that really brings everything together, or people.
Yeah.
So it's really starting to establish itself as a strategic partner to the business, as a consultant to the business, as a very key part to create a competitive advantage for a business and a marketing team. And that seems to be gathering more and more steam to where we are today, where there's this huge labor shortage going on. It's insane. I'm sure anyone listening to this, if you're in marketing operations, you're probably being hit up on LinkedIn hourly by recruiters trying to hire you. Everyone is trying to hire marketing ops. Every agency is trying to hire marketing ops because all the agencies are maxed out, because the people that can't hire marketing ops in-house are then turning to agencies. So we're dealing with that issue right now, where we're having to say no to a lot more clients than we can say yes to. And it's great, but it's also a bit of a warning signal where a lot of times things can get hyped up and there's a huge promise about the value that it can create. But then if that value isn't properly realized, then it can just go in that category of like overhyped thing, right? Like, and there's so many of those things in B2B marketing. So what we're trying to really talk about now is how can marketing operations establish itself in this position where the market, the business is thinking, okay, this is a strategic role. We need to give it more resources. We need to add more headcount. We need to really take it seriously. And now marketing operations needs to deliver on that. With now, if it gets more resources, if you get more headcount, how can you actually deliver and create that value to the business that the business is expecting? Because we all know there's a lot of operational skeletons in our closets, in terms of like our setup and technical debt. Like the last podcast, we talked about a lot of those things. So now is the time where we really need to level up our game, elevate, go from good to great, really think about how to be a leader in the business and move from that tactical to strategic.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to even add on to this, I think one of the things that's I've noticed within the conversation with people like, oh, MOPS is so important. MOPS is, is necessary to get things done. It's maybe like the unsexy part of marketing, but it's great. I even had someone, interview me on a podcast last week talking about that. But then after he said, well, like, what about the career path for MOPS? Like, it doesn't even, but I feel like there's not much of a career path for them. And I was just like, wow, I couldn't disagree more. I think if you do it the right way, and if a MOPS person really structures like how they, how they work and focuses on the three things we're talking about, I really think that they have a clear, straight path to maybe becoming a CMO or, a head of revenue operations. Cause I know that these groups are going to have, VPs soon one day. And so I challenged that. But I think part of that is still because they see it, yes, as this important thing, but it's so tactical or so business based. And so that's where I think the change needs to happen, especially for UMOPS leaders who want to grow in this career.
Well, we've had two people on the podcast who started off in MOPS. One is a CMO now, Dan, who was the old CMO at Sendoso, now CMO at Upkeep. And then Leah, who's VP of marketing, who was in marketing operations as well. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. What's the first of the three differentiators?
So this is what we actually based our whole Lean Data Ops Stars last year on, going from tactical to strategic and with a more business-centric approach. Now, there's so many aspects of this, and of course, we'll go into all of the details in our workshop, but really, it's being more proactive at the core of it. It's understanding what is the business trying to do and thinking about what is the business objectives, as opposed to like, what are your objectives as a marketing operations person? Because they could be, you could be different, but you need them to be aligned. So once you understand what is the business trying to do, which, one of the obvious objectives is grow and generate revenue, right? So make sure you're aligned to that one. But could be other ones like, creating a better, employee experience or whatever, like that you could potentially help because you are touching tools that potentially, impacting how your website operates and things like that. But anyway, so really understanding what those business objectives are, filtering them down into how you can impact those business objectives, and then building your roadmap to build what you need to build to achieve those objectives.
Yeah, totally. And we've talked about this, I think, on a past podcast with Justin Norris, when we're talking about the roadmap. But one thing is, yes, there are going to be these things that come up like last minute or changes, and you can allow for buffer for that. But I think the whole point with the prioritization roadmap is just make sure that isn't your entire day. That isn't your, 5 days a week, like a thing. It's really like, those will come up, but really then you're focused on these key projects. And the more you continue to do that, the more you're really going to provide value to the business. And we've noticed this recently, and I think some wake up calls kind of happen, and we get some anecdotal data when we talk to people who are not in marketing operations to say, our leadership team, like they don't understand all the little things that need to happen. They kind of just hear about these big things that, like, we get this dashboard. They don't think about the hours and hours of work or building a life cycle or updating data and what the automation you need to set. They just see a dashboard with now insights that they can use. So to think about it, if you spend all your day just like firefighting or doing these small things, really, like from a leadership perspective, they're not really seeing much. So if you can still focus on kind of some key core projects, that have like a lot of visibility too, because it's so aligned to the company. And also make sure that you're marketing those projects, like, create a deck around depending on what teams are support, receive on like the end result part for that. Like make sure they understand what the value was, and that your team worked on it, and that will really help, I think, with also just making sure that your team is really seen as strategic. So
Yep.
I just wanted to point that out, because I think sometimes we take for granted that like everyone kind of knows what is being done, but really they don't. So
Yeah. There's two things actually I'll say. I'll kind of jump on that. One, from the roadmap point of view, is really treating marketing operations like a product, right? And we've talked
yeah.
about this a lot. Like how would a product team work? Like Uber, when they're thinking about, okay, we need to, get more users, generate more revenue. And the product team is saying, okay, well, how can we, improve the user experience to be able to do that, or improve the driver experience or whatever it is. And then they're building features to help that, right?
Yeah.
And then when they deliver those features, it's not like they just deliver it, don't tell anyone. Like maybe the app would have a pop-up to say we've got a new feature, or it's in the release notes. So, it's thinking about like a product team, because you're creating a product for your marketing and sales team to use to sell.
Yeah.
So if you think about it like that, then it comes very naturally to you to do all the right things. And then the visibility piece, one of the things that I've actually been thinking about a lot recently, even in our consulting practice, is everything should end with a dashboard. Like everything you do should end with a dashboard, because a lot of times, say you're working on an opt-in project. If you can work on an opt-in project, like manage and tracking opt-in, and essentially like the business won't see any of it. Well, maybe they'll see the checkbox on the form on the website, but they're not seeing all the mechanisms and all of the processes and automation that's going on in your marketing automation platform and other aspects. So they don't really know like what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you created a dashboard to show, okay, this is how many people are opting in versus opting out. This is how many people are like, once they've opted out, are re-opting back in. This is how many people are,
By region.
currently opted in by region and the
Yeah.
amount of data. Like, and you have that on a dashboard. Now they can see that, oh wow, okay, this is why all that time went into that, and I can see what's going on. So like if you think about what marketing operations is, a lot of it is just like you're doing stuff with data, you're like creating data, you're collecting data, you're organizing data, and then you're presenting data.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you strip all of the other stuff away, it's basically that. Like, and there's systems that help you with that. There's tools that help you with that, whatever.
Yeah.
But the presenting part is important, because that's the communication piece. That's showing your work, right? That's showing what happened, because your CMO isn't going to go into Marketo and start looking at what you built, but they will go to a dashboard in Salesforce to see the result of what you built.
Yeah. And I think that's like a new realization, even for us. We're like, okay, now for our projects, like maybe let's even include that as part of the project, to like build out that dashboard and make sure that the client wants to do that, because it really can provide that insight. And I think that's a good segue into the next one. So what's the next differentiator?
So becoming a leader of all things data.
Yeah.
And just the last point in the last one. So obviously there's some things that naturally will always end in the dashboard, like if you're doing a reporting project, right? So that's obvious, but then there's some things that don't, but probably still could.
Yeah.
So like just wanted to point that out. So this does tie in really well with what we were just saying. And you want to be not only the person like fixing the data behind the scenes. You want to be the person building the reports, building the dashboards, gathering the requirements from the business on what data that they need to be able to make decisions and be better and improve their marketing, and then providing them with that data. So if you think, we always talk about having dashboards and reports for your CMO, for each individual teams, your field marketing, your digital marketing, paid media, your social, every team should have their own view, because they all have different metrics they care about. But you're going to have to go to each of those teams to figure out what do they need. you can come up with some ideas too, but you're going to work in an iterative way to then get their feedback and get them the data they need to be better. But that's you having to be proactive, right? Like, don't just wait for someone to go, can you create this one report for me for this thing? You should be more proactive to gather those requirements, create an analytics framework which has all of the reports and dashboards, and then be a leader on how they should consume them, right? There's a cadence to how people should consume data. Like, maybe, there's some dashboards they look at every quarter, and there's some that they look at every day. And you should be giving them the knowledge and training them on how to use that data in the best way to use it.
Yeah. I will say, like, when I look back on my career, the times where I aligned myself with being the person providing data, it's always just boosted my career.
Yeah.
Like, I saw trajectory because the business just saw it as insightful. And now I was in rooms with like heads of departments or CMO or VPs, or even I was delivering dashboards and insights to our CEO. And so like, what better visibility can you get for that? And I think we'd be surprised at, especially if you're going to a startup, like there's probably not a lot there. There is an opportunity. And so if you're a MOps leader entering a startup, and that's a first place to look, okay, let's figure out what our reporting structure is going to be for the business by team. What insights are they going to look at? And then what's like the foundation we need to create to do that? And that is such a huge opportunity. And when we talk about our roadmap, for me, that would be a number one thing to add to the roadmap.
Totally. And we see that with our clients every day. The MOps people that we're working with who are the people that are building kind of the decks for their CMO or the CEO for marketing data. Like, they're the ones that are really progressing. They're the ones that get the budget for whatever they need. Like, I have a particular client that I'm thinking of who will actually come on the podcast soon, Liz. She is the main person providing the data for a lot of the sales data, like pipeline changes and stuff. And she is providing that data. She's building the strategy for that data. She's figuring out the best way to get that data. And she's actually going to come on the podcast to talk about this. She finds it a lot easier than some of our other clients to get budget for new tools that are going to help her, to get budget for headcount, to get budget for, consultants to help her. So it all feeds in. If you're the one that's seen as the strategic partner for them, for the leadership to get what they need, then they're going to make it easier for you to get what you need.
Totally. Yeah.
All right, last one. This is one that you talk about a lot. So you want to take us through the third and final?
Yeah, the third one, which is probably not as expected, but I think for a MOps leader to differentiate themselves is they should be really owning the customer experience. And there's a lot of things that goes into a customer experience, but when you think about it, like a lot of what marketing ops does, like controls that experience. So from anything from like how the website operates to how when someone fills out a form, how their follow-up is, like, do they get routed properly? Are they going into nurture properly? What also communications after that are done, even opt-in settings, right? If we think about like a lot of the different touch points from that initial, person visiting your website all the way through to customer, MOPS has a lot of control over that. But also around the strategy for that, these other teams are creating strategy, but marketing ops is usually the one that's operationalizing it. And so what I've seen happen over the past few years is because other teams are really creating the strategy, they're just going to MOPS in different channels and requesting and requesting and requesting and requesting. And there's never been like MOPS to just sit there and be like, let's create they're not really air traffic controlling. They're kind of just like adding on. And so it's like you're building a freeway and just deciding, oh, we'll just create like a lane here and then a lane there, and someone could go there and there and there. And what's going to happen? Like, you're just going to end up in a mess. Yeah. You're going to have a crash or tons of crashes. So,
and a crash in this respect means a prospect getting completely inundated
yeah, inundated or lost, never even making it to where they were meant to be, right? That's the crash. So I think that and like losing pipeline. If you're, you have a prospect from a target account that requests a demo and no one ever follows up with them because it didn't make it to the right person, that's pretty bad, right? That's probably like the worst scenario. So really, I think now a MOPS leader, because they are getting these requests and because they're ones operationalize all these things that touch the customer experience, I do think that now there's a ripe opportunity for them to own it, to own the documentation of it, to own the strategy of how all the pieces fit together, to really guide the teams on where their strategy fits into the whole picture and where it can also be simplified or even made smarter. And so I think that more and more I want to see like people who are even just dedicated to this under the MOPS team. And that could even be someone from like even a demand gen background or something, but going in and really like thinking through that whole customer experience and ensuring it's documented, it's working. You're always following back up and checking that it's working. And yes, this is a lot, but if there's anything that's going to impact your bottom line the most, is this. If there's anything that you're like your customers don't see a lot of the technical debt you have in your Salesforce system, those are huge and play a big role in things. But there are some things that the customers can see, but what they do see is just that, what their experience is and how they, how they're being followed up with, how they're being nurtured and so forth. So I think that this can really differentiate if a MOPS leader stands up and really says, I'm going to own this and I'm going to make things better. I'm maybe even going to simplify things because I do think in some cases things are a bit overly complicated. I, that's another podcast episode, I think, for another day, but um, really making sure that it's seamless. And that could be by business unit. There's a lot of companies that are selling like different products and business units, and that's where it becomes even more complicated, yes, but also important, and where documentation is key. So for those of you who are MOPS and are listening to this, and just add that on to maybe another thing to focus on for the roadmap, maybe over the next year going into 2022, because people buy, people are buyers, right? The customer experience is so key into like how we choose a company to work with. If we feel like out the gate before we even a customer that we have a great experience, we're way more likely to buy. And that has even more weight today where the buyer wants to control that whole process and they just want to figure that out on themselves. And then right when they're ready to buy, okay, I'll engage a salesperson. So marketing needs to be able to make sure that that whole process is clear, concise, and great.
Totally. Yeah. I agree with all of the above. I think the big thing that really ties all these things together is being proactive. And I think that's one of the hardest things for MOPS to be when there's so much you have to react to. It's a full-time job just to keep on top of the stuff that is coming at you. But you have to try and flip that narrative. You have to kind of change that to the point where you can carve out some time to be proactive, to think about the business, to think about your analytics framework, to try and think about the customer experience. And then the more you do those three things, the more maybe you'll get in return to then have more resources to then help bring on someone else on the team to help you manage some of the reactive stuff. And then you can level up, be more of a leader, and continue to kind of deliver on the MOPS promise, which a lot of companies are going to be expecting, right? Like MOPS people aren't cheap. They're spending a lot of money on bringing people in. So they're going to be expecting a return. And if we're just firefighting and MOPS we get more resources and it's still just a firefighting type activity, I think the companies may get frustrated and reallocate that headcount. So we need to make sure that we flip that, we become more proactive, we become more strategic, and then we really, establish MOPS in its rightful place as one of the most impactful ways for a company to create a competitive advantage through better marketing.
Totally. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's probably a wrap. I mean, I feel like I could add on even more to that, but
Save it for the workshop.
I'll save it for the workshop. Yeah. So thank you everyone for listening today. Yeah. And if you did like today's, go and sign up for OpStars 2021. And
yeah, and we're going to be trying to, obviously this is all very high level a bit now, but I think the OpStars workshop's like a couple of hours, right?
an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. So we're going to go deep, like how to really build your roadmap, how to get that business centric approach, how to develop an analytics framework, and what's the best process to build one, what it should look like, examples of a framework, and then how to really start auditing your customer experience. So we've got a lot of kind of documents and examples that we will be sharing with you there. So lots of giveaways, lots of discussions, some audience interaction and everything. So it'd be great to see you there.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you enjoy this podcast, make sure you share it with your colleagues and friends. And we'll see you on the next episode of Forward Thinking. Have a good one, everyone.